Kellan Rivers didn't expect the flat tire on a rusted-out sedan to change his life, but then again, nothing in his life had followed expectation lately. Rain drizzled down in soft sheets as he pulled his old truck into the gas station parking lot. His son, Riley, asleep in the backseat with a half-eaten granola bar still clutched in his tiny hand. Kellan had just finished a 12-hour shift at the construction site, his shoulders aching and his boots soaked, when he spotted her stranded beside a sleek black Mercedes with the rear tire completely shredded. She stood out like a diamond in a gravel pit tall, wrapped in a fitted trench coat, her hair pulled into a loose bun that was already losing its battle with the rain. She wasn't dressed for car trouble, or gas stations, or anything involving dirt. Kellan rubbed a hand over his jaw. "Stay here, bud," he whispered to Riley, grabbing the emergency tarp from the back of his truck before jogging over. "Need a hand?" he asked, already crouching beside the tire. She turned. Her eyes were sharp, blue like winter. "I think the tire gave up on life," she said with a breathy laugh that didn't hide her nerves. Kellan grinned. "Well, lucky for you, I'm pretty decent with suicidal tires." She blinked, then smiled, really smiled, and it hit him harder than it should have. "Thank God," she breathed. "I've called roadside assistance, but they said it could take an hour. I'm supposed to be in a meeting." "You'll be back on the road in 20 minutes, he said, already lowering her spare from the trunk. She crouched beside him, ignoring the rain soaking her coat. "You don't have to, I want to," he cut in. There was a pause, just long enough for her to study him. "I'm Tessa Hartley," she said, offering her hand, Kellan Rivers. Their hands met hers soft and warm, his rough and calloused, and neither of them let go right away. "Your son?" she asked, glancing at his truck, Riley. "He's 5, out like a light." "He always sleep through tire rescues," Kellan chuckled. "Only when he's had pancakes and a full day of kindergarten." She smiled again, but there was something curious in her gaze, something unreadable. 20 minutes later, the tire was changed, and Tessa was still standing beside him, holding the umbrella over both of their heads instead of fleeing to her warm, dry car. "I owe you," she said softly. "You don't," he replied, brushing his hands off on his jeans. "Just maybe pay it forward." She hesitated, then reached into her purse. "Let me at least pay you for your time." "No," Kellan said instantly, stepping back. "I didn't do it for money." Her brows lifted. "You sure?" "You look like you've had a long day." He glanced back at his truck at Riley, now curled up with his hoodie as a pillow. "Every day's long." Something shifted in her expression. She tucked her wallet away, then pulled out a business card instead. "Okay, then how about dinner?" Kellan blinked. "Dinner? You saved my day. Let me return the favor." "I don't," he rubbed the back of his neck. "I don't usually do dinners with strangers from parking lots." "I'm not a stranger anymore," she said, holding out the card. "I'm Tessa, you're Kellan. You're a dad, a good one, and you just saved me from ruining a very important meeting." He hesitated, but took the card. "Besides," she added, stepping toward her car, "you look like you could use a steak that didn't come out of a microwave." Kellan watched her drive off, the taillights vanishing into the misty dusk. He looked down at the card. "Tessa Hartley, Vice President, Hartley Group Investments." He let out a low whistle. "Riley," he murmured, sliding back into the truck, "we just helped a woman with a tire who probably makes more in a month than I do in 5 years. Riley stirred and muttered sleepily. "Did she give us candy?" Kellan laughed. "Not quite, buddy." But 2 days later she called. He almost didn't answer. He figured she'd forgotten him, gone back to her world of tailored suits and first-class flights, but her voice was the same warm, curious, with that unshakable confidence. "I meant what I said, Kellan," she told him. "Let me take you to dinner." Riley was playing with a plastic dinosaur on the couch, and Kellan was staring at a stack of overdue bills, his pride warring with common sense. "I don't own a suit," he said. "Good," she replied. "I'm not inviting a suit, I'm inviting you," he swallowed. "Okay," he said finally. "Just dinner." Tessa chose a place downtown. Not the kind with laminated menus and fluorescent lights, but the kind where the host greets you by name and the wine list has its own leather-bound book. Kellan felt underdressed in his best jeans and a button-up that still had a faint paint stain on the sleeve, but Tessa didn't seem to care. She looked at him like he belonged there, like she wasn't pretending. "You ever been here?" she asked as they sat. He shook his head. "Can't say I frequent restaurants with velvet chairs," she smiled. "Well, consider this a new experience." They talked about Riley, about her childhood in Connecticut, about the construction business his dad ran before the accident, about the company her family built from the ground up. And somewhere between the beef tenderloin and dessert, he forgot she was a millionaire. She was just Tessa. And when she laughed at one of his stories about Riley putting peanut butter in the DVD player, Kellan realized something dangerous. He wanted to see her again, not for a thank you. Not for a favor, just to see her. But as they walked out into the night past valets and black cars, he hesitated. "I'm not what you're used to," he said. Tessa turned to him slowly. "Exactly. That's why I like you." And then, before he could overthink it, she leaned in and kissed him soft, sure, and nothing like he expected. When they pulled apart, Kellan was breathless. "I don't know what this is," he said. "Neither do I," Tessa whispered. "But I want to find out." Kellan hadn't expected to see her again so soon. He told himself the dinner was a one-time thing, a kind gesture from someone who lived in another universe altogether. But 2 days later, she was standing outside the construction site where he worked, her coat flapping in the wind, a takeout bag in one hand and a determined look in her eyes. "You're impossible to track down," Tessa said, stepping over a coil of extension cords while ignoring the curious looks from the guys on Kellan's crew. "I figured if I wanted to see you again, I'd have to come to you." "You brought lunch?" Kellan asked, wiping his hands on a rag as he approached. "You know this place isn't really built for surprise visits." "I figured you might be hungry," she said, holding up the bag, "and I wanted to talk to you, privately." He glanced behind him at the foreman, who gave him a shrug and a half-smile. "You've got 20 minutes, he called. Kellan led her to the back of the lot where a few overturned crates made a makeshift seating area. He sat, she handed him the bag, and for a moment neither of them spoke. "I'm not used to people like you showing up in the middle of my day," he said finally, pulling out a container of pasta. "I'm not used to showing up like this," she admitted, "but I haven't stopped thinking about you." He paused, fork halfway to his mouth. "I'm not sure what you want from me, Tessa." She sat across from him, her legs crossed at the ankle, her expression steady. "I don't want anything from you. I just want to see where this goes." "This," he repeated. "You mean us." "I mean whatever this is turning into." She looked down, then back up. "I know it's fast, but I've spent a long time around people who only see what they can gain from me, and you. You never looked at me like that." "I don't even know what you do," he said. "Not really. I manage investments for high-profile clients, hedge funds, private equity. I'm good at it, but it never stops. Calls at 3 in the morning, meetings across the globe, pressure that never lets up." She hesitated. "It's a life that demands everything, and I've given it almost all of me." Kellan nodded slowly. "And now you want something it can't give you." "Maybe," she said. "Or maybe I just want to eat pasta with someone who doesn't care what brand my shoes are." He didn't laugh. He couldn't, because the way she was looking at him like he was solid ground in a life filled with glass and smoke stirred something he wasn't ready to name. After a long silence, he asked, "You ever been around kids?" She tilted her head. "Not really. Why?" "Because if you're serious about this, you're not just getting me, you're getting Riley too, and he's loud and messy. And he'll ask if you're a robot if you wear too much perfume." Tessa smiled, but there was a flicker of something deeper in her eyes. "I want to meet him." Kellan didn't answer right away. He didn't know how to explain the rules he'd built around his world, the invisible walls that kept Riley safe, stable. He didn't bring people inside lightly. "He's not a test," he said. "He's my whole damn world." "I'm not asking to be his mother," she said gently. "I'm asking to know the part of you that matters most." Kellan looked away, his jaw tight. "This doesn't happen in my life, not beautiful women showing up with food, not honest conversations, not this." Then maybe it's time it did. They sat in silence, the wind lifting her hair slightly, the distant hum of machinery filling the spaces neither of them knew how to fill. Kellan dropped her off at her office that evening, Riley in the backseat babbling about a school project involving glitter and spaghetti noodles. Tessa turned around in her seat, her expression lit with interest, her replies full of real questions. By the time they pulled up to the sleek glass building she worked in, Riley had declared that Tessa wasn't boring like the lady at the dentist and asked if she liked dinosaurs. "I love dinosaurs," she said solemnly, and Kellan had to grip the steering wheel tighter than usual. He watched her walk inside, heels clicking against the marble, and for the first time he noticed the way people moved around her. Deferential, careful, like she was something untouchable, and yet she'd sat on an overturned crate and eaten pasta with him. That night, after Riley fell asleep watching a documentary about volcanoes, Kellan stood at the kitchen sink, staring at the card she'd left on the counter. He didn't belong in her world, but she kept showing up in his. The next weekend, she invited them both to a museum downtown. Kellan almost said no. He didn't like the idea of Riley being surrounded by people who might look down their noses at the kids' worn sneakers or ketchup-stained hoodie, but Tessa promised it would be casual. He didn't expect the private tour, or the security guard who greeted them by name, or the fact that the museum director came out personally to shake Tessa's hand. "You're kind of a big deal," Kellan muttered as they followed a guide into the interactive exhibits. "I fund some of their programs," she said casually. "It's not a big thing. It feels like a big thing." She looked at him, her voice soft. "It doesn't have to be." Riley was oblivious to the tension, bouncing from exhibit to exhibit with wide eyes and sticky fingers. But Kellan felt like he was standing in the middle of two worlds, and he wasn't sure if either one was solid beneath his feet. Later, as they sat on a bench watching Riley build a dinosaur skeleton from foam blocks, Tessa leaned in. "You don't have to keep holding your breath," she said. "I'm not trying to change you. I've seen what your life looks like," he said. "You think anyone in that world's going to understand you dating a guy who barely broke even last month? I don't live my life based on what other people understand." He looked at her, really looked at her, and for the first time he saw it something fragile behind the confidence, something tired. "Something real. You don't trust people easily," he said. She hesitated. "Neither do you. Maybe that's why this is so terrifying. Or maybe it's why it's worth trying." Riley ran over then, proudly holding up his half-assembled T-Rex, and Kellan stood, lifting his son into a hug. Tessa didn't flinch at the mess on his hands or the noise in his voice. She just smiled, and Kellan knew in that moment things were already shifting beneath his feet. He just didn't know if they would hold. The invitation came 2 weeks later, slid across the table during a quiet breakfast at a small cafe near the river. Kellan had met Tessa early. Riley was with Mrs. Lovell, their neighbor, who offered to watch him once a week so Kellan could pick up extra shifts or, in this case, share a rare moment of stillness. "This isn't a date," Tessa said, tapping the heavy cream envelope with one manicured finger. "It's a gala for the Hartley Foundation." "It's important to me." Kellan turned it over, not opening it. "You want me to go to a gala? I want you to be there, with me." "You mean in a tux surrounded by people who spend more on watches than I make in a year?" Tessa lifted her eyes, steady and deliberate. "I mean standing next to me while I give a speech about how we're expanding our grant program for at-risk youth. I want people to see who I care about." He looked at her, unsure if she realized how much weight she'd just thrown into the space between them. "So this is public. I'm not ashamed of you, Kellan," he exhaled and finally opened the envelope. Inside was an invitation printed on thick cream cardstock edged in gold. "Black tie. Saturday night. Hartley Foundation Annual Gala." The venue was one of those historical hotels downtown people took photos in front of but never went inside. "I don't own a tux," he said. "I already took care of that." The tux was delivered that afternoon, tailored, pressed, and hung inside a garment bag bearing the name of a designer Kellan had never heard of. It felt like stepping into someone else's skin, polished and unfamiliar. Riley stared at him from the couch, a half-constructed Lego truck in his lap. "Why are you wearing a penguin suit?" Kellan adjusted the cufflinks. "Because I'm going to a fancy party with Tessa. Is there cake? I'll let you know," he called Mrs. Lovell and confirmed she could babysit overnight. She didn't ask questions, just wished him luck and reminded him not to forget the overnight bag this time. Tessa met him in the lobby of the hotel. She wore a midnight blue gown that shimmered faintly under the chandelier light, the fabric sweeping around her like moonlight. Her hair was pinned back, exposing the sharp angle of her jaw and the delicate chain glinting at her collarbone. "You clean up well," she said softly, eyes sweeping over him. "You look like you own this place." "My family does," she replied, then added quickly, "only partially." The ballroom was a universe of crystal and gold sealing high arrangements of white lilies and orchids, champagne circulating on silver trays, and a string quartet playing something delicate Kellan couldn't name. Every person seemed wrapped in confidence, their conversations smooth and effortless. He stayed close to Tessa, letting her guide him through introductions. She didn't try to hide him behind small talk. She introduced him by name. She mentioned Riley. She didn't flinch when a man with a navy pocket square raised his brow and said, "Construction, you say?" "Yes," she answered before Kellan could. "And he's one of the most grounded people I've ever met." Later, Tessa stood at the podium, poised and powerful, her voice clear as she spoke about education access, housing programs, and her belief in second chances. Kellan watched her from the back of the room, a glass of untouched champagne in his hand, feeling something he couldn't name, something deeper than admiration. When she finished, people stood, applauded, some even whistled, and then she looked straight at him. After the speech, she pulled him aside into one of the quieter hallways lined with framed photographs of the hotel's history. "Why do I feel like I just saw a version of you no one else gets to see?" he asked. "Because no one else asks to," she said. He stepped closer. "You're not afraid of making things complicated, are you? I've lived my whole life in complicated. So what happens when this starts to hurt?" She met his gaze. "Then we figure it out, together." He didn't kiss her, not yet, not there, but he thought about it for the rest of the night. The next morning, back in his apartment, Riley climbed into his lap and asked if Tessa would ever come over for pancakes. Kellan hesitated. "You really like her, huh?" "She uses big words, but she listens," Riley said, serious. "You listen too." That night, Kellan called Tessa and invited her over the following weekend. When she arrived, she had flour on her jeans and a paper bag of fresh blueberries in her arms. They made pancakes. Riley spilled half the batter on the counter. Tessa didn't blink. She helped clean it up, then asked if they could add cinnamon. After breakfast, they played board games on the floor. Kellan watched her laugh at Riley's made-up rules, and something in his chest folded inward. Not attraction, he'd felt that from the start. This was different. This was dangerous. Later, when Riley was in the bath, Kellan stood beside her in the kitchen, the light low and golden. "I didn't think you'd come here," he admitted. "I needed to." He turned to her. "Why?" "Because I wanted to see how it felt to fit into your life instead of asking you to fit into mine." He stared at her, the air between them thick with unspoken things. "I don't trust easy," he said finally. "I don't either," she whispered. Kellan reached for her then, slowly, deliberately. And when he kissed her, it was quiet and certain and nothing like before. It wasn't a question. It was an answer. They stood there for a long time after, not speaking, the hum of the apartment filling the silence. Later, before she left, Tessa leaned down and kissed Riley's forehead as he slept. Kellan walked her to the door, unsure what to say. She touched his hand. "You don't have to protect me from this. I just don't want to lose something I never thought I'd get." "You haven't lost me," she said. "Not even close." And for the first time in years, Kellan believed it. The first snow of the season had arrived quietly overnight, dusting the sidewalks and rooftops with a soft, glistening layer of white. Kellan stood at the window of his apartment, coffee cooling in his hands, watching Riley press his face to the glass with wonder. "Do you think it'll stick till tomorrow?" Riley asked, his voice muffled. Kellan gave a small nod. "Looks like it might." Behind him, the smell of cinnamon and baked apples drifted from the kitchen. Tessa had come over early that morning, still in the oversized hoodie she'd borrowed from him 3 nights ago, her hair pulled into a loose braid down her back. She was humming quietly as she pulled a tray of muffins from the oven, the domestic ease of it so unfamiliar that Kellan had to blink a few times just to ground himself. "Okay, I give up," she said, setting the tray on the counter. "There's no way I'm getting that top rack to bake evenly." Kellan turned and leaned against the counter. "It's the oven. It's older than I am." She looked up at him, face flushed from the heat. "Remind me to buy you a new one for Christmas. Don't do that." I didn't say I was asking, she said, wiping her hands on a towel. Besides, it's not for you. It's for the muffins. An hour later, while Riley constructed a snow fort in the courtyard with the neighbor's daughter, Kellan and Tessa took a walk around the block. Snow crunched beneath their boots, and the air smelled like chimney smoke and pine. I got a call this morning, she said, pulling her scarf tighter. They want me to take over the London office. Kellan stopped walking. You didn't mention you were even being considered for that. I wasn't, not seriously. But someone dropped out and the board thinks I'm the obvious choice. He looked out at the park where the trees stood bare and quiet. How long would you be gone? 18 months, maybe longer. He didn't speak. She waited. I guess I knew this would happen eventually, he said. No, you didn't, she replied, and you shouldn't have to pretend you did. He turned to her. What are you going to do? I haven't decided. You don't need to stay for me. I'm not staying for you, she said, but I might stay for me. Kellan raised a brow. I've spent my entire life chasing the next step, the next title. I don't know if I want to anymore. She kicked at the snow lightly. For once, I want to choose something that doesn't come with a press release. They walked in silence for a few steps. I've never asked you to change your life, he said. I know, she replied. But you've changed mine anyway. That evening, after Riley fell asleep with a book across his chest, Kellan walked Tessa to her car. The street was quiet, snowflakes catching in the halo of the street lamps. I can't promise you easy, he said, stopping beside her. I'm not asking for easy. I've got a kid, a job that doesn't come with health benefits, and a truck that may not survive the winter. I've seen all of it, she said. And I still want to be here. He studied her face, the honesty in her eyes so clear it made his chest ache. I used to think being with someone meant giving up parts of yourself, he said. But with you, it's like I'm finally allowed to be all of me. She stepped closer, her breath clouding between them. I don't want the version of you that fits into a suit. I want the one who builds forts with his son and doesn't know how to accept help without arguing about it. I'm not good at this, he said. Then we'll be terrible at it together. He kissed her then, slow and certain, the kind of kiss that didn't rush. It didn't need to. 3 weeks later, Kellan stood in the middle of a kitchen that wasn't falling apart. New appliances had been delivered in quiet installments, not flashy, not extravagant, just working. He pulled a tray of cookies from the oven. Riley's latest obsession with holiday baking had taken over their evenings, and turned to see Tessa walk in, cheeks pink from the wind, her coat dusted with snow. You're late, he said. I stopped by the school. Riley forgot his gloves. Kellan blinked. You went to his school. I figured I'd meet the teacher while I was there. She says he's been talking about a bonus mom lately. Kellan coughed. Did she say it like it was a good thing? She said it like it made her day. He wiped his hands on a dish towel. You didn't have to do that. I wanted to. She walked over and slipped her arms around his waist. I told the board no, he stilled. You what? I turned down the London job. Are you sure? I'm sure, he searched her face. This isn't some kind of compromise. It's a choice, she said. For the first time, I'm choosing a life, not a legacy. He kissed her lightly, then again, deeper, his hand finding the back of her neck. From the hallway, Riley's voice rang out. Are the cookies ready, or are you still being gross? Tessa laughed against his shoulder. Come on, Kellan said, pulling her toward the tray. Let's go ruin his dinner. That spring, the three of them stood in the backyard of a small house with a white fence and a maple tree Riley had already claimed as his future climbing spot. The moving truck was gone. The boxes were mostly unpacked, and Tessa was barefoot in the grass, holding a glass of lemonade while Riley chased bubbles through the sunlit air. Kellan walked over and handed her a folded piece of paper. What's this? He tucked his hands in his pockets. Just something I've been working on. She opened it. It was a drawing Riley's, clearly of the three of them standing in front of a house. One stick figure wore a blue tie. Another had long brown hair. The third was smaller, holding a soccer ball. She looked up at Kellan. Did you tell him? I didn't have to. He already knew. Tessa smiled, her eyes glassy. You've got good taste in kids. He slipped his arm around her shoulders. And apparently you've got bad taste in construction workers. Terrible, she said, resting her head against him. But I'm keeping him anyway. And as the sun dipped low behind the trees, Kellan held her close. knowing with unshakable certainty that the life he never thought he'd have had somehow become the one he couldn't imagine living without. The sun was beginning to warm the early spring breeze as Tessa stood at the edge of the soccer field, her heels abandoned in the grass beside her. Riley was darting across the field in oversized shin guards, arms flailing as he chased the ball with wild determination. Kellan stood behind her, arms crossed, his face a mixture of amusement and pride. "You know," she said, shielding her eyes from the sun, "he's got your stubbornness." Kellan let out a low laugh. "He also thinks ketchup counts as a vegetable, that's all him." She glanced over her shoulder. "You're not worried about him playing with the older kids?" he asked too, said he wanted to prove he was fast enough. Tessa smiled, watching as Riley cheered after a clumsy goal. "He's going to give us heart attacks." Kellan stepped beside her, brushing her hair back from her face. "We'll survive." The match ended with Riley breathless and beaming. He ran toward them, grass stains on his knees and his cheeks flushed. "I scored twice," he announced. "I saw," Tessa said, crouching to his level. "You were a blur." "Did you see me fake that turn?" "Absolutely." That defender had no idea what hit him. Riley's grin widened. "Coach said I can come back next week." Kellan ruffled his hair. "Then we'll be here." That evening, they returned to the house with muddy cleats and leftover oranges. While Riley showered, Kellan grilled chicken on the back porch. Tessa set the table inside, carefully placing a small envelope beside each plate. When Kellan stepped in, the scent of basil and garlic drifting behind him, he noticed the envelopes immediately. "You planning a game show?" She shook her head. "Just open it after dinner." Riley was the first to tear his open, sauce still on the corner of his mouth. Inside was a card with a drawing of a beach, a little airplane in the corner. "What's this?" he asked. Tessa leaned forward. "We're going on a trip." Kellan opened his own card, eyes narrowing slightly. "Is this your handwriting? Don't judge me. I was trying to make it fun." He looked at the date. "Next week." I cleared it with Mrs. Lovell. "She's coming with us to help with Riley." "That way we can do a little of everything." Riley bounced in his seat. "Do they have dolphins?" Tessa nodded. "If we're lucky, we'll see a few." Kellan's eyes were still on the card. "You want to take us all to the Bahamas?" "I want to take us somewhere we can breathe, just the three of us." "And one very helpful neighbor." He stared at her, quiet for a moment. "You keep doing things I don't expect." "Then stop expecting anything," she said, reaching for his hand. The flight was scheduled for the following Thursday. Tessa insisted on packing light, but Riley tucked every toy he could justify into his small suitcase, including a plastic pirate ship and a crumpled drawing of their family that he refused to leave behind. The resort sat on the edge of the water, the villas tucked into the landscape like they'd grown there, with soft white sand stretching for miles. Riley ran barefoot down the beach within minutes of arrival, Mrs. Lovell trailing behind with a sun hat and a camera she didn't know how to use. Tessa and Kellan walked in silence for a while, the waves lapping at their ankles. "I've never actually taken a real vacation," he admitted. "Then this one has to count for something. I'm not used to things feeling this easy." "They're not easy," she said. "We just make them worth it." Later that night, while Riley and Mrs. Lovell played cards on the patio, Tessa led Kellan down a winding path lined with lanterns. At the end was a small cabana, candles flickering on the table, a quiet dinner already waiting. Kellan raised an eyebrow. "You planned this too." "I bribed the concierge," she said. "He's very susceptible to homemade cookies." They ate with the ocean as their soundtrack, the conversation slow and full. "I was thinking," Tessa said, her fork paused midair, "we never really talked about the future." "I figured we were building it one morning at a time." "We are, but she hesitated, then set her fork down. "I've been looking at a property, not for work, for us." Kellan leaned back. "A house?" "Yes, outside the city, big yard, attic windows, a place Riley can grow into." He didn't answer right away. The idea of permanence had never come easily, but with her it didn't feel like a trap, it felt like breathing room. "You want us to live together?" he asked. "I already do," she said simply. "But I want a space that's ours, not mine, not yours, ours." There was no hesitation in her voice, no fear. Kellan reached across the table. "Then let's go see it when we get back." The next morning, Riley built sandcastles with moats that never filled right, and Kellan taught him to skim stones across the shallows. Tessa watched them from her towel, a book forgotten in her lap. On the last night of the trip, after dinner and too many desserts, Kellan asked Tessa to take a walk down the beach. Moonlight shimmered on the water, and the breeze was warm and constant. He stopped near a cluster of rocks, pulling something from his back pocket. "I bought this the day we moved into the house," he said, opening a small gray box. Inside was a ring, simple, elegant, with a single diamond set in a band that curved like ocean waves. Tessa froze. "Kellan, I didn't know when the right time would be. But I knew I wanted to ask." She didn't speak, her breath caught in her throat. "I don't have a yacht or a private island," he said, "but I've got a life I want to share with you, every part of it, every morning, every storm, every school pickup and burnt dinner. I want it all with you." Tessa looked at him, tears slipping down her cheeks silently. "Yes," she whispered. "Yes, Kellan, always yes." He slid the ring onto her finger, and she kissed him like she'd been waiting her whole life to. They stood there long after, wrapped in each other, the tide slowly rising around their feet. The wedding was small, held in the yard of their new home with string lights overhead and Riley walking Tessa down the aisle, one hand in hers and the other holding a ring box with shaky pride. Vows were spoken with laughter and tears, and when Kellan kissed his wife for the first time, Riley clapped so hard he tipped over a chair. There was no press, no announcements, just the three of them, and a future they built with hands that had known both loss and love. Tessa opened a community fund months later, focusing on youth mentorship and trade education. Kellan helped design the center himself, laying every brick with care. And on Saturdays, while Riley played soccer in the backyard, Kellan grilled under the maple tree, and Tessa read aloud from whatever book Riley was too tired to finish the night before. Their life wasn't perfect, it was better, it was real. It was theirs.